Welcome back for season 3 of Sunday Soul Day. Today we are in Australia with Jamie Toyne, a seasoned entrepreneur, business coach, and creator of Flojo, a coaching program designed to help ADHD founders overcome burnout and welcome flow. He's also created an innovative Flojo Finder diagnostic tool, which is available for free on his website. Diagnosed with ADHD as a child, Jamie has experienced burnout 3 times, once as a professional tennis player and twice as a founder. He's also helped guided over 400 entrepreneurs through successful business exits. I'm so excited for you all to meet him. Let's welcome him to the show. Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, Jamie.
Thank you so much. Fun to be here.
I know. I'm so excited to have you on. I was really looking forward to this conversation and so grateful that you reached out and just feeling the energy of the show. So I'm very excited for this conversation today. Tell me, because I'm so curious, you were diagnosed with ADHD as a child and then went on to become professional tennis player. How did ADHD impact your experience as an athlete, both positively and negatively?
It's a great question. So, so, I guess like tennis was my escape from the classroom. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was like 11 or 12, I think. And it was because I was the classic case of ADHD. I was extremely hyperactive, extremely disruptive in the classroom. Couldn't sit still, found it very hard to listen, easily distracted. And so mum took me to see a pediatrician. I was diagnosed with ADHD. I continued to struggle in the classroom for a couple of reasons. One is that the medication back then was pretty hectic. It's an amphetamine-based product, and mum didn't feel comfortable putting her kid on that, which is so fair enough. So I continued to struggle through school. But I learned that I could really hyper focus on things that I really enjoyed. And one of those things was tennis. And so, when I was on the tennis court, I was able to sort of get out of my head and like escape the chaos that was my head, and just drop into my body. And I didn't know this at the time, but what I was experiencing was flow. And so, I think we sort of tip to from one extreme to the next. It's hypo focus, which is where we can't focus at all, to hyper focus, where we're just like totally in the flow state and totally, time dilation, and we sort of an hour goes by and it feels like a minute sort of thing. So I got obsessed with that feeling of flow because it was when I experienced peace. So I just played a lot of tennis. So and I got better and better, and I started to accumulate, some sponsorships. My ranking was going up when I was sort of 14, 15. And then when I was 16, I secured this sponsorship that was more like an investment. And the deal was basically that he would pay for everything. I was raised by a single mother who's a social worker. So tennis is a very expensive sport. So it alleviated a lot of pressure on my mum. But it put a lot of pressure on me to perform because I was very conscious that this person was paying for me, expecting a return on his investment someday in the future. As I got better and won more prize money, I would give him a percentage of my winnings. And it was sort of at that moment that the tennis court changed for me, and it was no longer this sanctuary where I was experiencing flow. It was where the noises in my head were the loudest. And so that was really where, it was like, the tennis was a great vehicle for my ADHD for such a long time. And then when the pressure became high stakes, that the prefrontal cortex really like grabbed on to, onto results. And I stopped sort of just enjoying and flowing and getting better. And I started sort of underperforming, and I was just super miserable. And that's, what eventually led me to my burnout. I didn't take it very far. I joined the pro circuit when I was 17. I dropped out of school and I was training full time. I was also having to manage my education, like studied between exams.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that, because
Yeah.
if you're at 17, like, how are you juggling all of that? It's very different if you're doing college, not to take away from anyone in high school and their sports, but on a pro level, it just everything is amplified. So that already is a lot of pressure. And I could imagine with the ADHD that exacerbated everything. So
Yeah, totally. I think what was cool about tennis was it was the one place where like I was coachable. I was able to listen. Like my coaches would describe me very differently than my teachers at school would. I could actually apply myself and I could listen. Because I was interested and I was excited to be there. And so that was a really important experience, I think, for me to have. It was a counter narrative that sort of countered all the negative sort of feedback I was getting from the world at that time as a kid. Um, and yeah, it was really hard to be, you know, um, studying for exams and doing my assignments, all the while, on the road, basically touring. And yeah, I don't know. It kind of like I learned a lot of sort of self-discipline, but it was also it's a very difficult relationship, between the different parts of yourself. The one that's like, the anxious mind that's like, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And the inner child that wants to just experience flow and have a good time and play.
exactly. Thank you so much for sharing. And that's so cool. Like, what was it about tennis that
Mm,
really got you excited about tennis? Because, you could have probably played any sport, right? What
mm.
was it about tennis?
Honestly, I think it had more to do. I don't know if it was so much the sport. I was actually probably like soccer or football, depending on where you live. Um, is was the other sport that I played. It was really had to do with um, the coach, the tennis coach, actually in the tennis center there. So I grew up in a really tiny town, in the middle of the country, in a really remote part of Australia. Like basically, if Australia is basically empty. Like it's occupied around the border of the country, and then there's like no one in the middle. So to give you an idea of how remote it was, like Mum and I for Christmas holidays would travel to go see our family on the coast. It would take 3 days to drive, and we wouldn't pass this is like 3 8 to 9 hour days of driving, and it would take you'd have to drive for 2 days, about 16 hours before you reached a town bigger than my town. And my town only has 25,000 people.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So really
Wow.
remote. So all of which to say, I mean, there was one tennis club, there was one soccer club, and the tennis club owner was just really amazing and just like organized all these tours where he'd take us interstate to play and compete and uh I think it was just the opportunity that I got that I was so yeah, well, I wouldn't say it was anything particularly about tennis. In fact, tennis is probably one of the more psychological sports, and
Yes,
probably
that's
not.
why I was asking because that's why I was
Yeah,
like,
no,
I'm so amazed by that because, especially your age, right? Where you're still
yeah,
learning your body and to be in
yeah.
your body. So to be able to go into sport like tennis
Mm.
is pretty remarkable.
I was like quite naturally gifted. I think physically, I think I just excelled well at sport in general. Um, but yeah, I think I reflect on my tennis career and go, wow, that was probably one of the hardest sports I could pick for someone with ADHD that was unmedicated. So yeah, and I mean, it's not a happy ending like, glory story, the tennis. Like I quit on my 18th birthday. I had a really bad burnout, and I was competing in a tournament. There was hundreds of people watching. There was an umpire, adjudicating the game, and I something snapped inside of me, and I smashed all my rackets. I forfeited the match, midway through the match, and I never played a. I mean, that was my last tennis match. It was my first experience with burnout, and yeah, my last tennis match.
Talk to me about that, like the connection between ADHD and burnout in your life during that time. Like, what were you experiencing? Like, just to color it a little bit more for the audience, that may be
Hmm.
experiencing burnout.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The way that I reflect on it when I look back is really I look at it in terms of like the relationship. I had with myself at that time. So I look at it like, the higher self, which is like, it's the prefrontal cortex. It's that part of the brain that's like strategic and setting the vision and, you know, reflecting on past events and projecting into the future. And it's like, it's never present. It's just thinking. And actually, interestingly, that's the part of the brain that if it's switched on, it's impossible to get into a flow state, basically. So that's like I call that like my general, right? That's like the general part of me that's like directive. And then the other part that is actually having to like jump on the tennis court and do the training and go to the gym and do the stretching and manage his diet and his conditioning and make sure that he's doing, actually do the study for his school exams. That was the workhorse. That was the one that actually had to do the work. Um, and basically, I mean, the short answer to that is that that relationship was completely toxic and it was broken. So my general had very little compassion for the workhorse. It was basically it resented my workhorse because it was like, the investor wants, I need to be top 50 in the world and you're all the way back here. And it didn't really matter how many matches I won or how hard I tried. I sort of it pulled me out of that growth mindset where I was just enjoying getting better and enjoying the journey of playing and competing. And it all became very results focused. And I think I talk a lot about like the general using like the carrot and stick approach, where you're sort of like beating yourself with the discipline stick to try to correct behaviors or habits or like improve, and then dangling the carrot of motivation ahead. Um, and the general never really allowed the workhorse to eat the carrot, and never really celebrated my wins. Um, and really, the workhorse started to rebel against the general, if that makes sense. So I started rebelling against myself. I started like slacking off in training. I started purposely losing matches sometimes on the tennis court. It was too painful to try my hardest and lose of fear of being punished by my higher self, my general. So I would just deliberately lose tennis matches. I'd throw tantrums, and so I think we can all relate to that, particularly in business as well, like where um, there's a part of you that has this goal of growing your business to or getting from A to B, and you have these goals, and sometimes the ambitious part of ourselves doesn't really connect with the actual experience of doing that work. So, for example, it's Sunday, right? We might set a to-do list for Monday and it's like 20 hours of work,
Yeah.
but you've only got 6 hours or 8 hours to do it in. So you've already set your workhorse up for failure. You set yourself up for failure. And so, yeah, I get it's kind of like I see it as a toxic relationship, really.
I love the way that you described that. And it's so when I said, can you add a little color? First of all, that was beautifully painted because it really gives such a great visual to the audience. And I'm sure, like, whether you're in business, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, it really resonates. It totally resonated with me because I am, very much a general, and definitely have the workhorse in me, and so my until I healed my relationship between the two of them and allowed them to become friends, like that's when I really experienced a lot more flow and joy in the way that I operated. And so I absolutely love that you explained it that way. That is flawless. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to steal that, by the way. Working
Please
with
do. Yeah.
clients. That's so good. So
Yeah.
good. Well, talk to me about your transition. One thing that, we talk about on the show is there's several things that we all experience in that, where we have a human experience. And one of those things is transitions, grief,
Mm,
pain, love, transitions, like we all
mm,
experience it, right? Talk to me about your transition, after you
mm.
experienced that burnout, what was that like? And then how did you get into coaching after that?
Yeah, wow. I'm really interested in transitions too. They're big and they're scary. There's so much
Mhm.
uncertainty. And often for ambitious people, or at least my experience has been that period of time, that container of time where you're moving away from something into something else, but you can't quite see what you're moving towards yet,
Mhm.
it's really uncomfortable and it's really hard to let go. So I experienced that in tennis, and I've experienced that in a couple of business ventures as well. Like I think for the tennis, um, to let go of that dream of having a successful tennis career was really hard. But I was so miserable, and I think when you get to a certain level of burnout, it's like your body has an allergic reaction to even looking at a tennis racket. So I let it get to that point, I suppose. So it was kind of not really an option. And the next couple of years was really amazing because I'd sacrificed a lot socially as well. Like I'd been traveling a lot. I wasn't partying and doing a lot of the things that, 17, 18-year-old kids were doing. So it was kind of cool to dip into that and just be a kid for a while again. And that was super flowy and just prioritizing making friends and having fun experiences. I traveled overseas. And the next dream I had was sort of like I mean, I don't think digital nomad was a word back then, but I had a dream of like, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to learn the skills to commercialize whatever I'm interested in and wherever I want to be. And I could see myself on a laptop in some cafe in France or something like that. So it made sense to go to business school, and I did an entrepreneurship. I specialized in entrepreneurship, so more on the practical side of business. After I finished my degree, I got a job at a tech company, and just right place, right time. I also did bring in that really like intense work ethic, I think, and I think within 6 months I went from like intern to director of a department, a new department, but it was the fastest growing department that that led to me being relocated to San Francisco. So I was living in Melbourne at the time, and then I was relocated to San Francisco, and I built a team of about 15 or 18 people, I think, at its peak. I think I was there for about 3 years, and then I started sort of buying and selling small businesses myself, and also continuing to help other people do it. And then I sort of spun out my own brokerage company, helping entrepreneurs buy and sell their companies in about 2015 or 16.
Mhm.
16, I think. And so, yeah, that was an amazing experience because I was interacting with entrepreneurs every day. I was looking under the hood of their businesses, valuing them, preparing them for sale, and then doing the deal making. So it was a privilege. And I was also, a lot of these people were living the lifestyle that I dreamed of. They were living in different parts of the world and just doing really cool things. So that exposure was really, really helpful. And then I relocated to Mexico and I was sort of living my dream. I'd sort of reached the top of my mountain in some ways. The business was doing really well. It was headquartered in San Francisco. Um, I generated enough wealth to sort of tie me over for the foreseeable future. I was surfing every day and learning Spanish, and yeah, things seem to be going really well. But I think that same relationship dynamic, I hadn't really learned at this stage. So the general never really allowed me to enjoy that. He just kept dangling the carrot further
Mhm.
and further and further ahead. And yeah, something's that same thing snapped inside of me. That sort of that relationship, just like it just got to a boiling point where I snapped, and I stepped down as the CEO of my company. I took a 6 month hiatus, and I went back to the small town where I grew up and to live with mum and just like meditate and cook and tend to her garden and try and figure out why I'm unhappy again. How did I get to this place again? And it was that point that I really um, discovered flow. I was like, what, why am I, I got to some peak of some mountain, but I didn't really enjoy the journey of getting there. And I'm not that happy that I'm at the end of it. And I think the mirroring, like the mirror that was held up to me by a lot of my clients, right? I'm helping people sell their company. And at that point, they're like, you sell your company for a couple of $1 million or $10 million or whatever, that's sort of like what they'd been working towards for years and years.
Mhm.
And it was pretty confronting to see how depleted and depressed some of these people were after like reaching. It's like the people that win the lottery and think they're going to be happy and then they're sort of miserable afterwards. So, um, that was a mirror, I think, and I've helped over 400 people sell their business. So like, I saw it a lot, and I noticed the same thing within me. So I really wanted to figure out like how do I make the journey fun? How do I make work feel like play? And flow became the really obvious answer. It was almost like actually, what's the opposite of burnout? And to me, flow encapsulates the opposite of burnout to me. It's like, when you're not feeling physically exhausted or emotionally exhausted, when you're not having negative thoughts about yourself, when you know, you're you're sort of performing at your full potential. I think we can all relate to feelings of burnout where we're just like,
Oh, yes. I saw it so much working in tech, and experienced it
mm,
myself. And what you talked about resonated so deeply, just working with founders at different
mm,
levels, and they're like chasing this end result of whatever, their goals are, right? Whether it's to exit, go public, whatever, whatever exit they desire. And then it's like, now what? Like, and so it's amazing, first of all, that you help 400 entrepreneurs. And this was through Deal Flow and Exit Planner. Am I saying that correctly?
yeah, you're saying it spot on.
Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's incredible. Like, what inspired you to even create that, like those platforms?
Yeah. So I guess the company that I was working for in San Francisco, the job that I got out of business school that sort of, opened up a lot of opportunity and a lot of learning for me, um, called Flipper.com was like a platform where
Oh, yeah.
entrepreneurs would trade their digital assets, domains and websites. And that's sort of how I fell into the work in the first place. And I loved the deal making. It was really exciting. But I think what I noticed is, a problem that kept, well, what happened was I burnt out, and so I ended up selling that company, um, Deal Flow. But there was one problem that I didn't feel I was really addressing in my last company, that I really wanted to zero in on, and it was not so much about um, the deal itself. It was helping people build a sellable company and build value in their company as they're growing it. Because I think when you're the broker, so usually by the time people are tapping you on the shoulder, they've been thinking about selling their business for years, and they're really tapped out and they want to sell yesterday. And so, a really big challenge was, you've worked really hard, you've got an idea of how much your business is worth and how much you're going to sell it for, and then sometimes I have to be the bearer of bad news and the gatekeeper and say, well, you probably can only get this because you didn't do this, or this is the reality of where the business is today, and you could do A, B, C, and D over the next 6 to 12 months, and you could sell and never have to work again. Um, and yeah, there was just I think I really wanted to focus on helping people plan for their exit. And so that's how the second venture, Exit Planner, came about. And that's, um, why I wrote the book, The Pressure Gauge Mindset, was to really just like teach people a system for scaling their business in a way that they could maximize their exit if and when they wanted to transition, right?
That is just so cool. Like, and I could imagine like you had a lot of examples for your book, you know, like just working with 400 entrepreneurs and probably seeing them at different, burnout stages. What did flow look like for you? Like when you went back and lived with your mom, like how did you achieve that? Because so many people are striving for that, right? And they have one idea of what they think flow is, but
Yeah.
they're not fully tapped in. So, like, first, explain what you believe flow is, and then how did you achieve it, or how did you, yeah, like, let's just start with how
Ah,
you achieve it.
I love that you've asked me this question. I'd love to talk about this. So after I burnt out and living with my mom, I got obsessed with flow. I think, I mean, flow is really interesting. I think the way that we understand flow in the West right now is it's actually quite narrow. I would say that flow has become synonymous with peak performance, right? That's what flow means now, to us in the West, and so that's. that's what I learned, right? So I was doing, ice baths and every day and saunas and, taking different supplements for focus, and I was tracking my sleep and basically doing all this biohacking, right? I was learning about neuroscience and flow. I was reading all the books, Stephen Kotler's books, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's books, and it was all amazing. And it works. Like, it's true. You can be 5 times more productive when you're in a flow state. And we all, it's that, and we're totally absorbed in the present moment. We're able to focus. It's, efforts and, actions and decisions just sort of flow effortlessly, and sort of perfectly. And so, I spent a lot of time basically building what I call like my toolbox of flow hacks. Um, and it was really, that's when I got into a flow and was able to, write my book, that I'd been working on for like 3 years at that point. And then I really, really got into a flow and published that. And then launched a government-backed accelerator program and launched Exit Planner in that time. It was a really productive time. But, um, so things were sort of like cruising along in my professional life again, but things were not working in my personal life, and I burnt out again. And that was really the transformative burnout. That was like, okay, I still haven't figured this out. I know there's something that in this, like in flow, that's like, um, really important. I believe that flow is the answer, but I'm not approaching flow correctly. And so I started to do a little bit more sort of research into, I guess, the history of flow. And what's really interesting is like flow, the concept of flow has been around forever. Ever, and it's just been different words. Like the ancient Greeks called it enthusiasmos. The Zen Buddhists called it zazen, and the Taoist monks called it wu wei. And there's some contemporary sort of, philosophers in the West as well, and psychologists that called it different things as well. But, so when you look over at the East, flow is, uh, it's a way of being. It's not this altered state of consciousness that you enter for a temporary period of time. It's a way of being. And, everything needs to flow. And so I think, I think it was when I started to understand flow a little bit more holistically that it started, I feel like, I figured out a way of becoming burnout proof, essentially. Um, and the easiest way to describe, I mean, the way that I look at it is, um, well, actually, I shouldn't take credit for that. I would say that in the Taoist texts, the way they describe flow not only as a way of being, it's our natural state of being. So it's actually our default state of being, right? It's our true nature. Um, and so that means that there's already an infinite amount of flow that we can tap into. So all that toolbox of flow hacks, they're great. They help you get into a flow state, for a period of time, but they don't necessarily cultivate flow. And it's not about adding things, it's actually about removing things. So, I switched the focus from trying to add all these things to like, which were really only reducing burnout symptoms temporarily. They weren't actually addressing the underlying cause of the burnout. And so, I started looking at the things that were basically pulling me out of alignment and like blocking me from flow, right? And I sort of picture myself as like this river. Um, and there's new boulders all the time, sort of like getting popped in that river. And it's, if I let them build up over time, then my river stops flowing, essentially. And that's what burnout looks like. So I just need to be really honest with myself and figure out like what is blocking me from accessing my natural flow. And I think to put that into some practical examples, um, I would say that, my tennis career, it was probably just my mindset and that, really not, I think if I had have just really named the pressure that I was feeling and really worked through that with a psychologist, or even speaking to this investor, or even letting go of that investment and saying that's ruining my tennis experience. I'm not ready for this kind of opportunity. That would have been me addressing the boulder that kept me blocked. When I look at my first sort of significant business venture, Deal Flow, I think, I can see, there were some things that were out of alignment. I mean, it was an all commission business, so it was sort of an eat what you kill culture in the work team that I built, and that didn't really align with my values. And so I didn't feel that proud. When I'm really honest, I didn't feel that proud of what, there was financial metrics and other success metrics that I could have felt proud on, but I didn't feel really aligned to my values of like the team culture I wanted to build and what my values were. And so I think, one way of removing the boulder is to sell the business. Another one would have been to realign the remuneration packages for my entire team, for example. And maybe I would have felt really proud about the business and I wouldn't have burnt out, for example. And so that's really how I approach flow today. It's like flow is my natural state. What is blocking me from flow? And it's just like constantly scanning my environment to see. And the easiest way to people go, well, how do you know what's out of it? What the blocker is? And when I think about flow, I think about energy, right? So if I put energy into someone or something, where does that energy flow? Does it flow back to me or does it keep flowing out? And is it an energy leakage? So if something's zapping you or draining you, there's some aspect of it that's out of alignment. If it's a relationship, it doesn't mean you need to get rid of that person necessarily, but there's something that you need to address.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's that when it became that simple and that was my framework. Oh, I just need to remove the blockers. I actually am flow. It became really, really simple.
I love the way you describe that. And thank you so much for sharing those examples. I know that'll be really helpful to our listeners. And, the thing that I could not agree more with is its energy, and its energy within yourself. And, when I'm working with clients, I'm a coach as well, I'm always asking them like, get into your center. And when that feels off, right? Like something's not right. You're out of flow. And you can be in flow outside of work. Everybody talks about flow state in a work environment, but I'm like, you can be in flow just in conversation. You can be in flow hanging with your family, like that's when like you're in a good energy, kind of realm and it feels good. It feels like you're just flowing. And that's just the easiest. I love that you use the river as an analogy, but it's so true, It's
Mm.
it's such an energetic exchange, and I saw this really cool thing, and I'll have to find it and send it to you. I think you'll appreciate it. But it was these two frequencies, like a ball on either side, and it was showing when you're not in flow, what it looks like, and then when you're in flow, and it made this harmonious tone. And so when I think about flow, I think about like it flowing like music, like have you ever heard music that just sounds disjointed and not, So that's when I think about flow. I'm like, when I'm out of flow or I'm not harmonious within myself, like I always go to my center, I do the check, and I'm like, where is that coming from? So
Mm.
I love that you described that. Love that.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, and I really agree. Like it is harmony,
Yeah.
and in a holistic way. And like to
Mhm.
come back to the analogy of the river, we only have one river. We can't we don't have a work river and a personal
No.
life river. It's one river and it's flowing or it's not flowing. And
Great.
sometimes the biggest blocker that would take you to the next level in your business is like often moving a boulder in your personal life. A completely sort of random example is not a client, but a dear friend of mine is doing his psychology, PhD in psychology, and he's been doing his thesis for quite a number of years, and the last 2 years he's done very little. Like it's hardly moved. He had a crypto startup in the middle of it, and he had a massive breakup with a partner. Um, and he sort of like moved to a new town, and there's just a lot of things happening in his personal life. And I caught up with him the other day, and I said, hey, how you doing? And he's like, dude, I am just in flow. I'm working on my PhD like 9, 10 hours a day, and I'm just loving it. I'm working through the weekends, and I'm just flowing, and it's great. And I'm like, wow, what's changed? And he's like, well, I'm in a stable relationship with my fiance, my new fiance. I feel settled in my community. Um, and I don't know, I'm just able to flow. And so that was like a really nice reminder for me that like, sometimes, our personal life can have these huge effects on our ability to like perform. And sometimes it's, focusing on that is the biggest win you can have for your business, whether you like to admit it or not.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. You said so much there just sharing that story because, I used to work in tech, in startups, and I would see that, and that was also my challenge too, my own personal challenge. I had challenging relationship and it definitely affected, my performance, like in a way that where I overworked. And so I wasn't able to experience joy, and I would find pockets of joy. And so that's, where I would probably confuse like, oh, I'm in flow, right? But I would there'd just be pockets of joy, but not full joy, And so I saw it so many times over. And also like it could be the other way around too, like challenges in the workplace. And then it bleeds over into your personal life, it's part of my coaching is aligning, your personal and your professional life, mind, body, and soul. And so it's
Mm.
so important to make sure, again, going back to your center, that you're in alignment. And when you're not, that's when you need to look at some things. So, like, tell me about Flojo. Am I saying that right? Or is it
Yeah, you,
that's
you nailed
that is
it.
an amazing name, by the way, because I don't know if you follow track and field, but
Ah,
Flojo is one of the best track and field athletes ever, and I was a huge fan of hers. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. What was
yeah,
your
cool.
aha moment in creating this?
Yeah, so the name was really like I think I mentioned a little bit how I feel like in the West the word flow has sort of lost its true meaning a little bit and become really narrow instead of so I was like, do I start creating a lot of content on flow and like trying to like, bring the meaning of flow back to its center? Or do I just create a new word that just feels good to say? And when I really thought about it, I thought about my journey with ADHD and how a lot of the time I felt like I'm trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and that's me trying to fit into this neuronormal world, right? And every time that I feel my best and I'm doing my best work is when I'm just embracing me and my energy and really like. And so I think that was the point when I embraced my true nature, it then became my superpower, and things started just clicking into place, and things just became easier. And so I was like, I want to create a new word, and I think the word mojo, people relate to, right? It's like, when we feel like we're out of alignment, we got no mojo, and then our mojo is our secret sauce. It's our essence. It's what makes us special. And mojo, I looked at the meaning, the roots of that word, and it's actually comes from like the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria when they, as part of the transatlantic slave trade, a bunch of boats got dropped off in Cuba, and so it's actually an Afro-Caribbean word, mojo, and it means unique magical power.
Oh, come on,
Um,
that's so good.
it's a beautiful word. It's a beautiful word.
Beautiful. I'm gonna start using it more. That's so good.
Yeah, and so I just mashed those two words together, right? Flojo.
Amazing.
And so and what that means to me is in order to be in flow, we need to embrace our true nature and in order to like really leverage like unlock our full potential and like leverage that as our superpower, we need to be focusing on leveraging our true nature. And so back to the alignment piece and the energy piece, what energizes you, what aspects of your business is draining your energy, what aspects of your relationships is draining your energy. They're the things that need to be realigned. Design your world to fit you rather than trying to fit into you know what your conditioning is, what you've told you should be doing. And so, yeah, the name of the program is Flojo. I work with creatives and entrepreneurs with ADHD. They're some of them are burnt out, others are sort of recovering from burnout or feel like they're on their way to burnout. And I basically help them uh, cure or conquer burnout and master their Flojo essentially. So yeah, it's a performance program. It's a performance program that goes for 12 weeks. And really, it's just as simple as identifying what their blockers are that are blocking them from flow and helping them remove them so they get more flow in their life essentially.
I love it. And is it a one-to-one coaching program or is it a group coaching?
Yeah, it's quite intensive. It's one-on-one. There's one-on-one component and a group component. So the one-on-one we might meet every couple of weeks, and then every other week that there's no one-on-one coaching, there's group coaching and yeah, yeah.
Awesome. And
Mm,
one thing I've heard, and I actually think the first person I heard describe this was Simon Sinek. He described ADHD as being both a challenge and a gift.
mhm.
Would you describe it similarly?
Yeah, yeah, spot on. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it isn't a challenge. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a gift. It's absolutely a gift. I think you know, when we embrace that part of our mind that is quite creative and spontaneous and impulsive, and you know, if we can quieten the voice of the general that's sort of super critical, and that's part of our conditioning, right? Like if you grew up with, you know, if you were diagnosed as an adult, it's likely that you probably had experiences at school where you were sort of shamed for not being able to concentrate or feeling like you're stupid or you're too silly or you can't focus. And it's like, yeah, just removing that conditioning, letting go of that conditioning and really embracing your beautiful, wacky brain, you know, your skills and what you're good at and what feels flowy. If you focus on those things, you know, the path is going to become a lot clearer and a lot quicker to achieving your goals and a lot easier and most importantly, a lot more fun. You know, I really believe that, you know, if work doesn't feel like play, then you're doing it wrong. Um,
Yes.
Particularly for people, yeah, neurodiverse people and entrepreneurs. Like if you're working for yourself, like gotta have some fun.
Yes. Well, and it's so interesting because when I first saw the name of your program, I thought it was how I would describe flow, which is joy. And so
Yeah.
I thought it was like a flow joy, like just kind
Mm,
of playing on words. So I love that you touched on that because when I'm in flow, whether again I'm in my personal life or my professional life, I'm experiencing a level of joy, that
mm,
and it's not like joy. And when I say joy, I'm not like talking, oh yeah, I'm having a good time. It's like it's a joy in my body,
mm,
like a joy in my state of being. So anyway, if you
mm.
want to steal that.
I love that so much. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
No, of course. So, talk to me a little bit about your book, because I know you mentioned it earlier, pressure gauge mindset. Like, what is one key takeaway that, the listeners can apply to their daily lives from your book?
Mm. Well, I guess the main thing is that, you know, I think the entrepreneurial journey can, you know, people that aren't in it can really sort of like glamorize it, a lot of the time. And, you know, I think the reality is for a lot of people starting their business that, you know, we don't pay ourselves very well in the beginning when we're starting up a business. And you know, we're often reinvesting whatever we make back into to growth. And so, you know, that exit, um, even if you're not planning on exiting, you know, you're going to exit the business some way, somehow, whether it's through death or, you know, whatever. At some point, you're going to exit it. And so, you know, it makes sense to build your business in a way that you know you're gonna you're not gonna leave any money on the table when you exit. I mean, a lot of people, you know, the exit is really how they get compensated for the hard work that they put in for the 5 to 10 years prior in a lot of ways. Um, so I think that's like, you know, just a really simple key message for anyone that's running a business. The other magical thing about running your business to, running your business and setting up your business in a way that makes it an attractive like target for acquisition is that you are then making your business a really attractive business to own. So a lot of like ex-clients would come to me wanting to sell their business. They couldn't get the price that they wanted. And so I'd give them, I'd start doing the exit planning with them and I'd say, okay, well, these are the things you need to do to get the price that you want. So they'd go off and do these things to improve their business, to make it a more attractive business to sell. And I reckon more than half of the time that people actually did implemented the things that I suggested ended up not wanting to sell their business because they wanted to sell their business because they weren't enjoying it. And now they really like their business, because no one wants to buy a really stressful full-time job. So, or a business that's so dependent on the owner that it's going to fall apart when the
Mhm.
owner's not there. I think the key message is really understanding the mindset of like what would be an attractive business to buy, and then running that business accordingly, essentially. And just I would say that some of the most obvious things is like like, is the business going to fall apart without you? Like, how dependent is the business on its owner right now, and
That's
how
a
do you
really
do
big one too. So,
that?
for the audience tuning in, like that's such a big one because I think about that too, because I consider myself the brand of all of my businesses, right? But I'm in all of them. And so if I'm not in them, then they're not moving yet, And so I'm working on that exact thing that you're talking about. So I'm going to be picking up your book so I can get some tips because it's one
Mm,
of the things that I think about long term. I try not to plan too far out, like, maybe
mm,
that's a bad thing, but I like to stay as present as possible and allows me
mm.
to really just operate in a more Flojo way. And so,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking like 5, 10 years down the road. I just am not.
Mm,
And so, but I think about that too. So I think about for solopreneurs, that are building businesses
mm.
and doing well, the minute they step out of it, like, you know, they are the business, So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
really,
Yeah, and I don't
really
think you
well.
need to look 5, 10 years ahead into the future. I
No.
think actually your approach is really smart. Just keep, staying close to the energy, right? And what's in
Mm,
front of you. But yeah, I mean, there's just some simple principles that you can follow that are mentioned in the book that just that are just going to make the journey easier and funner for you anyway. Yeah.
amazing. Well, a couple more questions because I'm curious. Like, you work with ADHD founders, entrepreneurs struggling to stay focused. Like, what is one habit or tool that you recommend they implement immediately? I mean,
Hmm.
everyone's different, but if you could pick one.
That's an interesting question. Ooh, it really depends. So I'm gonna snake around this question a little bit, but I'll try and give you something. I think it really depends. Like so my process is really trying to understand like what is blocking them from flow. And so for some people, I often for a lot of ADHD entrepreneurs, I'm not because we all live in a ADHD world now, where everyone's sort of distracted and struggling to focus. There are a bunch of focus is often one area that where people feel really, really blocked a lot of the time. And so, um, but for other people, it could be something completely different. It could be like bigger things that are out of alignment. But if I think about focus, yeah, it's really interesting because they're almost like all the things that we work on are almost like pretty standard productivity hacks, and things like that. So I'm trying to think of one thing you can implement today. Well, let's riff off the higher and lower self, right? So I talked about that relationship. Um, Effective calendaring. So like visual calendaring. So instead of just having a to-do list, one thing a lot of clients do is like they have this to-do list and they're not attributing one, they're not the person who's writing the to-do list, the higher self, is not um writing out the to-do list in a really simple, actionable way. It's just like very vague. It's like look at the or respond look at chapter two or work on chapter two. There's no outcome to that. It's like a more specific task would be like um, review the first 3 pages of chapter two and finalize for editing or something like that. Something a little bit more specific. But then also attributing like an estimated amount of time. And if the task is takes more than 90 minutes to complete, it's no longer a task. It's a project. And that project needs to be broken up into tasks. Um, and then instead of just having a to-do list, actually adding your to-do, like transferring your to-do list onto your calendar so visually you can see the time blocks that you have in your day and when you can do it. And so I'd say time blocking is a really good one because it forces your higher self to actually engage with the reality of what the workhorse's day is going to look like. Oh, I've got to drop the kids off at school in the morning. Oh, I've got to start cooking dinner at 5 o'clock. I've got 4 hours to do like deep work where I'm uninterrupted work. Okay, so that's maybe two time blocks where I can do something. And then I'm going to have a couple of hours in the afternoon, but I'm going to be really distracted and there's going to be people calling me and I'm not going to be able to get into a flow state. So that's maybe when I respond to some emails and I do some other stuff. So it's almost like designing your day
Yes.
as a team between your higher and lower self. So you're not setting your lower self up for failure every day and you're actually creating some momentum and actually able to celebrate a win. Because it feels shit to, excuse my French, it feels
No,
crap
it's true.
to get through your day and only have ticked off 15% of your to-do list.
Yeah, exactly. But I've
Hmm.
seen that even with people that aren't diagnosed with ADHD, right? Like you talked about just people being, you know, their attention spans being so little, with all the dopamine out there. But I find that time blocking is so important, but I love that you take it a step further and, use the 90-minute rule. Like that's so
Mm.
good because I think a lot of people don't do that, and they don't realize that that then becomes a project when it's over a certain amount of time, and those need to be broken down into smaller tasks. So that's a really great tip. The other thing, I was working with a client that has ADHD, and one thing we did was like something so simple that, all of us could benefit from is just pausing and carving
Mm.
pause, to quiet the mind because,
Totally.
her mind was very much like this all the time. And so,
Yeah.
in addition to working on your projects and doing that, is just really carving out time to like pause in your day.
Totally. But
So,
that's the thing with time blocking as well. You look at people's calendars when they do it and you're like, wow, that
yeah,
time block overlapping with that time blocks. How are you going to do those things at the same time? Aren't you in a meeting with so and so? How are you, And then
exactly.
I ask my clients, when are you going to go to the toilet?
No, exactly.
When do you plan on having lunch? And so like if there's no white space in between the time blocks for just like you to just be, like you're setting yourself up for failure again because you're not a robot and you need to go to the toilet and you need to fill up your water bottle and you need to make yourself a coffee. You need to eat some food. And so yeah, it really is just like starting to space things out and be realistic about what your actual what the capacity is of the workhorse. And actually once you start to get a bit of momentum with that, there's no point dangling the carrot so far ahead that, and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about the flow channel,
Hmm.
right? To get into flow, you need to get the ratio between like your current skill level and the challenge. If it's too challenging, if it's too far out in front, you can't get into flow. You feel overwhelmed, you feel anxious, you feel stressed, and that's where I got in my tennis career, right? It was way too far out in front. And if it's too easy and the challenge isn't high enough, you get bored, you feel apathetic. And so it's about getting the balance between those two things right. And a very rule of thumb is like you want it to be the challenge to be slightly outside of your skill and ability, like a tiny bit. So you're reaching, it's got novelty, and that's the ultimate sort of way you want to set a task. And so another thing is if a task is easy, that 90-minute task feels easy, try and do it in 45 minutes. And create some novelty so it feels flowier if it's a boring task. And if it's a really hard task, break it down, make it easier.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to create a subtask saying, you know, talk to Damesha about how to create something cool on Canva, to reduce the knowledge, reduce the knowledge gap and actually be able to, you have that knowledge now. The next task feels easier, right? So it's really like trying to stay in the flow channel there with your
Yeah.
time blocking tasks. Yeah.
That is such gem. Anytime someone drops a gem, I have to call it a that's a gem for everyone. Hopefully everyone grabbed that. If not, rewind us back. Well, one of the questions I ask all of our guests, and I'm so curious with you, working with clients yourself, like, do you have any rituals that help you maintain flow? Like, how do you fuel yourself back up? Your mind, your body, and your soul.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna seem like the lamest answer, but like sleep is the easiest. I had a 12-hour sleep on Sunday, so I'm grinning because I'm
What
still
was
like,
that like? Oh my goodness. I'm a
it
single
was
mom. I'm
amazing.
like, I want to know what that feels like. That's
Oh,
amazing.
it was amazing. I mean, I had sort of 5 hours and 6 hours sleep the two nights
Oh,
before, and so I was a bit depleted and underslept. But yeah, I mean, I'm just constantly reminded when I have like an 8 hour plus sleep, like how anxiety just drops, like everything is just easier. I just feel so much calmer and more centered. So I think, like, I mean, that's always going to be my number one. Um, but yes, I do. I mean, I mentioned I have this like big toolbox of flow hacks, right? And I still use a lot of them. Like this morning, I was a little bit sleepy, so I had a cold shower and I did a few things to just like wake myself up. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna stick with sleep, I think is my answer.
no, I'm so glad you said that because it's such a great reminder. And I think we don't sleep. Like, and even when we do sleep, it's not good sleep. So it's such a great reminder. I'm constantly working on my sleep. And I mean, for years, I can say it now, but it was so horrible. I used to sleep like 2, 3 hours a night, and I operated like high on like 3 hours, 4 hours max. And then I finally got to a place where it took me till I got like in my 30s to sleep really well. Um,
Mhm.
and and I still don't sleep past a certain amount of time. It's usually like 6.5 hours. Like, it's nice if I can get 7, but it's very rare. But as long as I get my good 6, I'm like, great, I can operate really high. And I think this is the other thing. Everyone requires different levels of sleep, so we're not
Yeah.
telling all to sleep 12 hours, or we're not telling you to sleep 6, but I think it's really just finding what works for you. But it's such a great reminder to use that, and put that in
Yeah.
the toolbox because we just don't.
Yeah, totally. And just to pull on that thread a little more, I think that rule sort of applies with flow in general. And I think it's something that like, if you go into the flow science, even on the performance level, like active recovery is like so important and like so to move through the flow cycle and get back into flow again. And so I think there's all these studies around productivity and they look at people that work 70 hours, I think it was 60 hours a week versus 30 hours a week. And over the first 6 weeks, obviously the people that are working 60 hours a week achieved more and were more productive. But when it got to the 8 week mark, actually the performance and what they got done leveled out. And then if you looked at the following 8 weeks, actually the people that were working 30 hours a week were more productive than the people working 60 hours a week. It's a mind-bending study, but I think what we don't realize is we it's almost like we have this dysphoria about how much, like, we're actually not aware of how much our performance drops when we are exhausted or when we are overworking. And so I think when you're the owner of your own business, like your special gift, your magic, your Flojo is not being a factory worker that like just does all these like repetitive tasks. Like if you're really leveraging your skills as the owner of your business and pushing the direction, like creativity is paramount. And like looking and doing things in different way. If you're filling your life and your calendar, like, with just thing after thing after thing, and you're working from day to night, and you feel like you don't have time to sleep in or whatever, um, the chances are that you're probably not growing as quickly as you could be, and you're definitely not like accessing your full potential. And I think, and just to bring it back to sleep, if I, for whatever reason, stay up till 2 in the morning, like I'll cancel a morning meeting, and I'll push back my alarm from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 9 p.m. because I'll prioritize sleep to make sure that I get at least 5 or 6 hours of solid work done rather than just like a tired day. I mean, it depends on what my commitments are, obviously, but
Of course.
yeah.
You have to speaking engagement be a little difficult, but yes, no, but it's so true that I think that is such sound advice, and I have seen, working as a people leader in tech, people just come to the office like half asleep, and they wouldn't even be there, so it goes back to again your center and being very present, and I think we're just operating. So, gosh, this has been such a delicious conversation. Like, I could talk to you all day. I'm so obsessed with flow too. So, I love this conversation. Where can people find you if they want to work with you? Like, are you accepting new clients? Because you're in Australia. So, like, are you accepting clients all over the
Yeah,
world? Or are
I'm in
you okay?
Australia. I obviously have a lot of connections in the US. I've got clients in the
Okay.
US and all through Europe as well. I've lived in Europe and America and other
Amazing.
parts. So yeah, I work with clients all over the place. I am currently in Australia. You can find me on my website at jamietoyne.com. My program, information about the program is just at my website, / Flojo, Flowjo. And I think it's really interesting. I'm not really on social media, and I haven't been for about 8 years. And I think,
Whoa.
yeah, it's kind of a strange one, but I made that decision pretty early on because I was pretty aware of, I'm still not really medicated for ADHD, and so I there's some extreme measures that I take to protect my focus, and that's been one of them. So I'm not really on social media. I do have a LinkedIn account, and I am getting pushed more and more to start producing content. I'm in the early stages, but I will have a YouTube channel, and my LinkedIn is just / Jamie Toyne 1, my name, and then just a one. Um,
Perfect. I'll be sure to link everything below, but love that you're accepting new clients. I'm sure people will listen and want to work with you. Thank you so much for coming on and blessing Sunday Soul Day. This has been, like I said, just an amazing conversation, and I can't wait to have you back.
yeah, me neither. So good to meet you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, amazing. And everyone, have an amazing Sunday as always.